Hello, Gestaltung, Darstellung, Digitale students. This is technically lesson 9, and it's a little bit of an extra for you, showing you a workflow from Vectorworks to Illustrator to Photoshop. Now, this is not a course recommendation. Well, it's not a course recommendation as such, but I wanted to show you because I think it's really important you know how to embellish your plans, and it would be very nice for the outcome if you could attempt some Illustrator Photoshop work. So the first thing I have to explain is that this is not necessarily an industry standard method that I'm going to use. An industry standard method would be to set all your line weights within Vectorworks, to set all your fills on all the layers. However, this does take some time to set up. So for sort of speed of use, we're going to use a bit of a quicker method, which I'm going to explain and show you. So I'm going to use the plan view as an example. So if you open up your Schlesisches Tor plan view document and come to your viewport of your Schlesisches Tor plan, I've got mine saved here. And what we're going to do this time, instead of exporting as a PDF, we're going to export in our viewport as a DWG. So to do that, just data export DWG. Then you see these options appear. I always select DWG 2004, 5, 6. Just follow these options as they are selected here. Make sure that you have your viewport plan 1 to 200 selected, not any other viewport, and click OK. Then it's going to ask you a place to save it. So I'm going to save mine in my folder, lesson 8, DWG, today's date. As you can see, I've made quite a few already. So I've got 1, 2, 3, so I'm going to call this one 4. All right. Then we simply save within that folder. All right, nice. So now we come to Illustrator. And we're going to open that document that we've created. That DWG. Now this is the magic part. This is what's great, actually. It will automatically snap to the A3 viewport of your Vectorworks document while retaining all of your DWG layers within Illustrator. So all of your structure will remain the same. So in order to do that, make sure you have scale to fit artboard selected. Not scale by and not original size, scale to fit artboard. Don't scale line weights, and make sure in your layout option that you have plan 1 to 200 selected. So that's your viewport that you created in Vectorworks, and Illustrator is going to read that. So follow these instructions exactly as so, and then hit OK. And then you're going to see your plan from your viewport in Vectorworks appear in Illustrator. Sometimes there may be randomly some layers turned off. For instance, here it's my tree layer. Just turn on all the layers so you can see them all. Right, so we can start working in our line weights first, and then we'll do our fills. So to work in line weights in Illustrator is really, really handy because we can see exactly what the line weight looks on screen, rather than in Vectorworks it's not such a good representation of an accurate line width. So we're going to work through the layers one by one. actually no, first thing we're going to do is we're going to set an overall line weight that we want everything to be at. And we're just going to see how they look. Let's see how one PT actually looks too thick. If I now come out of, so we can see that that line weight's far too thick. It might be okay if we want to highlight maybe the outline of our design, but we don't. So we're gonna just see what 0.25 looks like on all layers. So that's Command A on the Mac, STRG A on a Windows keyboard. I'm just going to deselect those layers. So that's looking better, but yeah, could still be a little thick maybe on some layers. I'm going to set, for everything I'm going to set 0.25, and for my Darstellung layer, so for my Entwurf layer, design layer, I'm going to make it a little thicker, something like 0.5. So I'm going to come to that layer. The way that Illustrator works is if you click on a layer, in your layers, so if you click on an object, in your layers panel, you'll see exactly which layer has been selected by this little box that appears. So if I hit this layer, you'll see it's the tree, and if I hit this layer, you'll see it's the Entwurf layer. So to select all objects on that layer, just simply come to this layer and hit that box, left click it, and that will select everything on that layer, which is great. But if we only want to see that layer, we hold down Alt and left click the eye on that layer. Voila. And magically everything disappears and we just see the layer that we want to see. I'm going to select everything and I'm going to select a new line weight, 0.5. I'm going to turn everything back on. To turn everything back on, hold Alt, left click. So there we go. I've highlighted my design. You can see that it's a bit more poppy in terms of line weight than the rest of the design. Sorry, the rest of the site plan. So yeah, I'm happy with that. The only thing I might do is make the building outlines a bit thicker as well. Generally, that's the case in most plan drawing. You have to make a thicker line for buildings to show that they're sort of a solid city Städtebau object. You can do that just by selecting that layer. Let's make those maybe even thicker. Don't know. Maybe that gives them too much prominence. Let's make them also 0.5. Okay, so that's a simple overview of line weights in Illustrator. We're going to add in some fills now. There are several ways to do fills. In a lot of your case, I imagine that your objects will be singular lines that come into Illustrator, in which case you won't simply be able to select an object and fill it. You'll probably have to fill it using the this very useful tool called the Interactive Malen Werkzeug tool, which is a simple shortcut of K on your Mac keyboard. And what that does is, say if I select a color on my fill over here, let's make a nice kind of cyan blue color, and I click with that layer selected. First I have to come to that layer, select everything, maybe I'll turn everything else off. So while everything's selected, select a fill color, and actually that did everything automatically because I've actually already filled that object, so I'm going to unfill it just a second. Select everything, and then come to that Werkzeug tool, K, on your keyboard, and to show you that you can just fill everything very fast with that tool. But I'm not going to do that because I already have my lines closed. So I have no need to do that. I'm just going to end up doubling my fills, which I don't want. So I'm just going to have a simple fill over all my objects. To turn everything back on is simply left click I on that layer, and then I'm going to fill in my building. Yeah, it's best to work through this chronologically actually, and come through the document working on each layer independently, turn off every layer. Here I see it's just trees. The trees I'm not actually going to need in the end because I'm just going to Photoshop them. Sometimes on your layers you'll have like a viewport on each layer. So if you select everything, it'll also select that viewport. So when you fill everything, it'll also fill the viewport. So you want to actually deselect that layer. To deselect anything in Illustrator is just Shift, left click. I'm going to recolor them with that color. In this option, it remembers your last color selection. So if I want to get rid of that fill, I can just select none. If I want to refill, turn the rest of the layers on. I've got the barn over here. Right, so I think actually this might be individual. This might be individual lines, so I might be able to show you that vertex tool. Select a barny color. Oh no, everything's closed again. But remember, if your lines are not closed and you don't have closed boxes, the vertex tool only works if your lines are actually intersecting one another. Otherwise, the fill, it won't let you fill that object. Think of it like I don't know, a basin holding water. If there's a break in the basin, then water's going to come out and spill onto the rest of the page. So everything has to be sealed shut. So all the lines have to be touching. So a reminder of that vertex tool. Select. Oh, just do it automatically again. Select the fill color, and then it'll highlight everything in red that you want to fill, and you just come through and select everything. But as I said, I don't need to do that because I already have that layer is closed, so I can simply select everything and just fill it. I might want to give some definition to the top of this barn roof. I mean, a barn roof would actually be black, so this isn't accurate, but well, I want it to be yellow. So I'm going to make this dark yellow to show that there's a shade between the top and the side. So to do that, I'm just going to select that object and pick a darker color of yellow. I'm going to do that for all of my objects. Use the ink dropper tool. This is also really useful, which is shortcut I on your keyboard to pick up a color and then hold down. What was it? Is it hold down Alt to drop that color? No, sorry, getting confused with my programs. Select the object that you want to be that color, and then hold down I, and that object will automatically switch colors. Really handy. It's V. V is your select tool on your Mac keyboard, selection tool to snap back to selection. Like in your CAD drawing software, it's normally X, whereas in Illustrator it's V. And direction tool, so if you want to edit a line, then it's A. So a little side point there. So just going to select that, give it a darker color. And then I'm going to make this this side color even darker. So select a darker yellow and give that a let's change that. So then I can simply select this one and this one while pressing Shift to select both. And then I ink dropper tool, and that will darken that nicely. All right, that's our train layer done. Coming through all our layers, filling things bit by bit. Right, so this layer is going to be a sand, and I'm going to fill this with sandy, a light kind of pale sandy color. It's too dark. I can always see how this looks in context later when I have everything switched on. Oh, it's kind of like a little bit red, isn't it? Anyway, I'm just being picky now. What else we've got to fill? We've got the beds, these things. Oh yeah, the rim of the site boundary. Give that a grey, light grey, maybe. Ah, it's filled the inside of that. In this case, actually, I'm going to use the Werkzeug tool, which is this one here. Shortcut for that is K, don't forget. Select everything and select inside of that object. Ah, now that's interesting. That's reading it as two separate objects. I don't know quite why that is, but it could be something to do with the way it imported from Vectorworks, but I can just simply fill both sides. What that does, and this is important to note, is it makes a group of the fill. So it will group everything on that layer that's been filled with that Werkzeug tool. So that will have effect later in Photoshop. It might mean that our line and our fill is grouped onto the same layer in Photoshop, which we don't want, but we'll come to that one later, and I'll show you how to problem solve if that's the case. Actually, most of these layers we don't even need because there's nothing on them. So it'd be much more efficient if you just delete them. Cars, just leave those white. Building, ah yeah, the buildings we just, I think the buildings we just give like a white fill to. We don't want to draw attention to them, but they need to be filled. So I think that's filled them. Yeah. Keep working through. I think we're almost there. Anything else? Oh yeah, and this is an important layer to fill. This is our block layer. I'm going to give this very, very light grey. Oops. I will have to select each. You will probably, these lines on your version of plan won't have been joined. I join these in Vectorworks. You could join them first in Vectorworks before exporting to Illustrator, or just use the Werkzeug tool, this one, and fill them that way. I might just do that just to demonstrate. Oh yeah, and the other thing with that tool is anything that's selected, it will fill. Actually, I don't need to fill anything outside of. That's a point, actually. Go back, go back, go back, go back. I only need to fill to the edge of the page, not beyond. It won't make any difference because when you export, it only exports the artboard, but just to be picky. Alright, we somehow missed our flower beds, which I'm just going to make a simple grass colour. Some kind of green. Going for kind of quite neutral colours, nothing too poppy. Of course, it's your choice what you choose. Oh yeah, and the barn as well. Sometimes it's quicker just to select an object, see what layer it's on, and then just work on that layer. It's up to you how you like to work. Maybe this one will give a darker grey too. Grey, grey, grey. Das ist Berlin. No, what am I saying? Berlin's a very colourful city. That's unfair. Alright, so that's basic fills and line weights done in Illustrator. Now here's a great little export tool that's, I think it should be on the 2016, 17, 18 version of Photoshop, could even be earlier. But this is a relatively new option. And it's, so you have to come to file, in Illustrator, File, Export, Export As, use artboards, that is very important, otherwise it will export the whole drawing area. Photoshop, PSD. And then make a new layer, sorry, not a new layer, a new folder in your Gestaltung Darstellung folder, and call it PSD, today's date, and then give this file a name. So I have many versions in here. I'm just going to call this 5. It's version number 5, and export. All right, and then it will come to this option here. Now, what we definitely do want is the layers, because we want to be able to see the layers in Photoshop. We want to preserve text editability. That's magical because it allows you to edit text even in Photoshop. And basically all maximum editability turned on. Don't worry about embedding the ICC profile. Hit OK. RGB 300 ppi. OK. And it will write the file. Writing the Photoshop file can take a while. I never know why, because it's actually quite a light file. Come to Photoshop. Open. Shortcut for open is Command O on your keyboard. Gestaltung Darstellung. Lesson 8. PSD. Today's date. 5. See previous drawings. Ignore those. Great. So there we have it in Photoshop. And look at this. All of our layers have remained exactly how we had them in Vectorworks, and exactly how we had them in Illustrator, and are now exactly in Photoshop without us having to import individual layers, which is the industry standard method, which takes forever. We have all of our lines and fills separate. So it's all organized for us. We don't have to do any layer organization. It's a very efficient method. However, I have to point out one thing which annoys the hell out of me. And I don't know why this is, but there is a glitch, at least in my version of Photoshop and Illustrator, where sometimes a fill on a large surface area spills out into in a glitch in a box, and I've not been able to figure out why this is, and I think it's just my version. I don't think you'll have a problem. If you do have this problem, then it's not worth worrying about it and going back to Illustrator and exporting. It will take you forever to work out what the problem is. Just simply in Photoshop, come to that layer, have auto select on, come to that layer that's corrupt, and just crop it out by hand. That mistake, and I think that's going to be the quickest way to deal with it. And you can see there's also a line that's corrupt as well there. So yeah, like I said, I don't know why this is. It's a strange error. I've never seen it before. I mean, it's really not much to correct it. You can see I deleted a bit of a line there. That's not cool. Undo, undo. Yeah, got to be a bit careful when you're selecting, especially lines in Photoshop. It can stand out a long way. Yeah, that's a very annoying error. I don't know why that is. It doesn't matter. For the purposes of Photoshop teaching, it'll be fine. My CPU is going crazy now, so it's processing like mad because I have several programs running. It's causing this Photoshop to slow down, so I apologize for the langsamness of my program. Okay, so we're going to do very basic Photoshop here. I don't want to overcomplicate anything. First things first, I want to get rid of these trees, and I want to import some nice PNG, slightly photorealistic trees. However, I do like sketchy trees as well, but this example I'm going to use a sort of photorealistic tree from above. So that's my, my tree layer, where all of my trees are on. If I turn that off, it'll take some while to process, but it will do it eventually. They've got annoying names. We should simply just rename things, trees. Okay, and now I'm going to import. I'm going to import a PNG of a tree. First, I'm going to make a sublayer within that layer, within that group. To make a group sublayer, you just drag the group into the group. I'm going to call this tree PNG. And then new layer, and that layer will be created within that group, which is what I want. And now I can import my PNG. Which is that? It's the JPEG, and that's a PNG with transparency. Actually, no, it's in JPEG, PNG. Yeah. Hope this one has transparency as the background. Yes, it does. Great. And then hit Enter to position it. Now, what this has done is it's imported a PNG, which is a reference file. It won't lose quality when you rescale. JPEGs, however, do lose quality when they rescale. Always make sure that you import and you have this little symbol here, which means the image isn't rasterized. It means it will retain its quality. So, little trick in Photoshop to note. I want the light to come from southwest, which is this direction. This tree naturally has light, it has a depth to it. So you can see light this side and dark this side. So I'm just going to angle it to the direction I want my light in. This document, unfortunately, is a little bit slow. Hopefully it's not on your computers. Just rescale that. To rescale an object, just hold Shift to rescale it proportionately to the correct scale. That object didn't go into our tree layer, so let's just put it into tree PNG, and let's give this tree PNG folder an opacity, just a slight one. Okay, so that's the first tree in. And then I'm going to duplicate for all trees. To duplicate an image in Photoshop, you hold down Alt and you left click and drag. And just do that for every single tree. So I'm just going to do the small trees for now. There is actually a difference in size of tree that I want to distinguish. We'll make two groups, one called small tree and one called large tree. Because later we're going to add shadow, and then obviously larger trees have a longer shadow than the smaller trees. Normally Photoshop isn't this slow. I have recording equipment going that's taking up a bit of my processing speed, so that's why. So I'm going to make another sub layer, group. Call this large. So I've got tree PNG. Okay, let's just large tree. I'm going to rename this one small tree. So that's all my small trees on the small tree layer, and I'm going to copy one of those small trees across to my large layer by dragging that up into my large tree group. Give that also an opacity, but I'm going to give this one less opacity than the small tree, just slightly, 93%, something like that. And now you're going to have to rescale this tree to fit. Duplicate it around the large tree. Large trees are mainly in the Entwerf zone. And make sure your large trees are on top of your small trees, of course. That's why I did the small trees first. All right. If I move these trees out of that tree group, I can simply turn off all of the existing trees that are underneath that group and leave on those two. I can call this trees Vectorworks VW, and I've got that as a reference as my Vectorworks file. And then I'll make another group and call this one trees. And then I'll move both groups into that. Layer. So now I can turn off all trees, all Photoshop trees in one go. This one I have turned off. So that's trees. What else do we want to do? We don't want to overcomplicate this. So I think we just add shadows and then we say we're done. Maybe I give this little box here, which is our viewport layout, a bit of an opacity, make it look a bit more elegant. Wow, there's a lot of subgroups here. So is that in Kine? Yes, it's in Kine. So I can just come to Kine, come to opacity, and just turn everything down. That means we can see everything through that layer. Okay, so to give everything a shadow, simply, oh, it's a bit glitchy. Come to the layer that you want to give a shadow to. So this is my Entworth layer, which is that weird parkour design. Right, so here's a little trick, and it's a very nice trick. Effects, drop shadow. It's super simple to do. It'll give you a drop shadow in a direction at 90 degrees default. We're going to angle that to match our tree shadow. So we're going to angle it about minus 134 degrees. And then we're going to set a distance. You've got to think about the height of these objects. And obviously, this is a very basic way of doing shadows because in the real world, all of these objects have a different height. So shadows will be longer on some and shorter on others. But for this quick plan, I'm just going to make an overall shadow on each object. And then it's nice to set a realistic opacity. Generally, I use between 40 and 40 and 30 for the shadows. It won't work. So the shadow layers will only work on objects. You see, actually, it doesn't really work here, but it gives you the effects of a shadow, because naturally this would be closed, right? It's not a hovering object. It's a solid object, which means this, in the real world, would be a closed shadow. But what it does work especially well for is trees. So we're going to add drop shadow to all of our trees. Where are our trees? There's our trees. We're going to add one to our large trees and small trees. We're going to do the small trees first. To add the effects, click on the group, click on the effects, drop shadow, and it will remember the direction from all of your shadows. So never move, once you've set your global light, don't move it, just keep it the same. Now these are obviously higher than the objects, my Entworth objects, so I'm going to increase the shadow length. Might take a little while to process, that's why it's slow. To increase it a bit more. 75, let's say that's 75. Yeah, it's looking, well, no, it would be a bit longer naturally. Yeah. Yep, that's okay. And then for our large trees, we're going to do the same, but we're going to make them longer. So before we had, actually I can't remember what settings we had for the effects. Distance was 100 pixels, so we can go like 120, 130 and see if that works for the large trees. Distance, just simply type it in. 130. No, we'll make it longer. 150 pixels. Nope, even longer. 200. Ah, there we go. Yeah, that'll do. Okay. I'll tell you why this method only works if your tree isn't naturally overlapping a building object, because a building would actually be higher than the tree. And the effects layer will shine down on all layers that are naturally beneath it. So what we could do is come to our building layer, and move it above the trees. Quick tip with in Photoshop, you can give each layer a color, so you can see immediately green equals trees, etc., etc. Come to our building layer. I'm going to make our building layer gray. I'm going to move it above the trees. There we go. And now the buildings are above the trees, so we can say that the buildings are higher than the trees now in the plan. Okay, and the other thing we're going to add drop shadow to are these beds, these grass objects. But we're going to add an inner shadow. Let's check that that's the right layer. So come to your effects panel, and in your effects it will say inner shadow. And it will give us a nice little inner shadow on that layer, just to give some depth. So that's okay, I'm happy with that. You can make shadows sharper with, I think it's choke. Is it choke? Yeah, choke. And size. No, sorry, size is the sharpness. That's kind of like the spread. So if you want a really sharp shadow, I just give a little bit of softness to the shadow to make it look more natural. And the choke just tells you how much spread you want the shadow to have. But that'll be all right. Okay. And then I'm also going to give a drop inner shadow to the sand. So it's going to be a step down into the sand bed. So effects, inner shadow, and I'm going to keep that the same as my bed. Click OK. Yeah, that's basically it. I wouldn't want anything to be more complex apart from this object here, which is the barn truss. So we want to give that a drop shadow, of course, to show the height of this structure. Distance, make it something like maybe I'll make this object, this shadow a little darker, although you shouldn't really keep all the shadows the same. But I want to, because I already have quite a grey bridge and the shadow doesn't really stand out. So the barn, also needs a shadow. It's too long and too dark, so I'm going to drop that down to 40%. And drop the distance down a bit. Okay, I could add a little bit of texture to the sand. This can be done by using a filter called Add Noise. Noise, it's a noise filter, Add Noise. Monochromatic always works better for this. There you go. And you can see some noise has been added so it looks like sand, but you can adjust the amount. You can make it 20, so very noisy, or maybe 15 as a compromise, or 17 as a compromise. You have to test this out with the preview, and you have this uniform and Gaussian as well. Gaussian makes it even more intense, but I'm just going to use uniform for now. Yeah, I could do that again with the grass, why not? I'm making this tutorial way too long. But I just want it on the fill, so I want to do these all in one go. So I can select all my layers from the bottom of that layer to the top of that layer, and then I can come to filter. Ah, it doesn't let me do it. I thought it would. I think you can also add noise as a adjustment layer. Let's have a look. Or as an effect on the whole layer might also be an option. No, it's not. Ah, well then you'd have to do each individual bed. I've shown you how to do it with one object, so I'm not going to do it now because I'm wasting time in this tutorial. We do need to have an effect on the curve, so we've got a height difference between the road, so we do need an effects, a drop shadow layer on here as well. Why can I not see that? Maybe it's safer if I just do it on the object itself within that group. Don't know why I can't see that. It should be acting. This might be the corrupt layer, in which case effects might not work on it for some reason. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's annoying, isn't it? Yeah, basically it's not letting me select. To show just one layer on is exactly the same command in Photoshop as it is in So it's actually reading this as white as a fill. That's why I couldn't put a shadow on this object. If I wanted to get rid of that white, I could go to Filter. I could select that layer with just one layer switched on, and I could come to Select. I could come to Color Range, and then I could select the white, hit OK, and delete it. So then I'm just left with the grey. Then I can come back to that group, hold down Alt, and then you can see it's disappeared, the white, on that group. And now I can apply effect, drop shadow. And now you can see a drop shadow is appearing. But the other thing is, we need to make another white layer underneath this, all of the layers. To do that, you just say solid color white. Okay. Make sure it's at the very bottom. Drag that down to the bottom. Oh, I can't do that somehow, so I'm going to drag that one above. Oh, I can't do that, so I'm going to have to, oh. Fiddly Photoshop sometimes. Okay. Come to that layer. Effects, drop shadow. Distance, bring it right down. We just want a little curve. And I want the shadow to be sharper. Or maybe not quite that sharp. Okay, so let's put a shadow on the block layer. We also had this annoying little frame. The outside frame is okay. You could fill the outside with white. That would be a nice crop frame. I'll let you work that one out. But we do have this inner frame, which I want to get rid of. This line on the inside. It'll take me some time probably to find it. So it's actually in a layer with an effect on. We could come through all of the objects, or we could just simply have auto select on, zoom in and select that object and turn it off. Yeah, there we go, that's got rid of it. So there we go, we're left with just... I think it would be nice if you put a crop boundary of white around the frame. It would be a nice touch. But I'll let you work that one out. Okay, we're going to have to finish this tutorial because it's taken too long. I hope it's been helpful. The last thing you could do is create one more layer with one more group with a layer inside it, call it shadow. And on that layer, using the mask tool, lasso tool, L, just simply L as a shortcut, you could create a shadow for the building, and that we can sort of work out a rough height. Photoshop is really going slow, and I apologize for that. It's lagging because I'm zooming in and out all the time. Hopefully it's not crashed. That would be a shame. L. To scroll on Photoshop is the spacebar option, but I think you'll figure that out pretty quick. And to fill anything quickly with a selection is G, and then to switch from black to white is D. Sorry, white to black. Fill it, and then give the opacity. Given an opacity of, I guess, 40, because all of our other shadows have been 40 so far. Maybe it's too dark. Just take that opacity down a bit. Yeah, that'll do. All right, we're done. So then the next thing to do is just to export this as a JPEG high resolution. So File, Export. Sorry, Save As. Shift Command S is a shortcut for Save As. JPEG. Create a new folder. Gestalten Darstellung, Lesson 8. Call that folder JPEG. Create. Keep the file name the same. That's fine. Yes, save. JPEGs collapse all of your layers individually, so don't worry about it. Won't override this file. That's fine. We're saving as, so, and we want to have the largest file size, quality 12. Hit OK. For a minute, your layers will all disappear and collapse into one. Don't panic, they haven't. It's actually just generated as JPEG. If we come to that folder, that we created, I'll see that image. Voila, at a really nice resolution. So that's how you do it. That's a very quick, well, not very quick, but I think the best way to go from Vectorworks, Illustrator, Photoshop as quickly as possible. I hope you found this useful. Let me know if you have any questions. Don't feel pressured to Photoshop, but I think it would be a great addition to your plan, section, elevation, what have you, if you have time. Give it a go. Why not? Nothing to lose. See you on Wednesday, 8 AM for the presentation. Look forward to seeing your work. Goodbye.